You want a divorce? Fine, my wife said as she slid the papers across the polished oak table. And when this is over, the kids are staying with me. My daughter lowered her eyes. My son stared at his phone. Nobody said a word for me. Dad, maybe it's time to stop fighting, my son finally muttered. 3 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom and watched my wife smile at her friends as if she had already won everything. Give her the house. Give her the accounts. Give her whatever she wants, I told the judge. My wife actually laughed. See, even he knows there's nothing left to fight for. She thought she was watching the end of my story. She had no idea she was standing at the beginning of hers. And the most shocking part was that a single line buried inside a laboratory report was about to destroy the version of reality she had spent years building. Before I tell you how that happened, let me ask something small. If this story speaks to your heart, or if it reminds you of someone you've known, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And if you're listening right now, leave a comment telling me the city or country you're watching from in your local time. I always find it incredible to see how far these stories travel and who they connect with. And if you stay until the end, I'd love to know what lesson you take away from everything that happened. My name is Richard Bennett. I'm 68 years old, and this is the story of the night my family fell apart and the secret that changed everything. It all started 6 months before that courtroom hearing on a cold October evening in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The maple trees outside our house had already turned red and gold. The air smelled like fallen leaves and would smoke. From the outside, our life looked ordinary, maybe even successful. I had spent 37 years running a regional construction company. My wife, Melissa, was 62 and worked part-time at a real estate office. We had 2 grown children. Emma was 34. Tyler was 31. I believed we were entering the peaceful chapter of life people talk about after retirement. I was wrong. That evening, I came home carrying a takeout bag from Melissa's favorite Italian restaurant. I remember feeling oddly happy. I had scheduled a small weekend trip for the 2 of us. Nothing extravagant, just a lakefront cabin about 90 miles away. I thought we needed time together, time away from the noise. When I walked through the front door, I found Melissa sitting in the living room. Both kids were there too. Nobody was smiling. What's going on? I asked. Melissa folded her arms. Sit down, Richard. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. I set the food on the kitchen counter and sat across from them. Tyler wouldn't look at me. Emma looked like she had been crying. You're scaring me, I said. Melissa slid an envelope across the coffee table. Open it. I pulled out several sheets of paper. Divorce documents. At first I thought it was some kind of mistake. What is this? I asked. Exactly what it looks like, Melissa replied. I'm done. The room suddenly felt smaller. Done with what? I asked. With this marriage. I laughed nervously. Melissa, we've been married for 40 years. 41, she corrected. And I've wasted enough of them. The words landed harder than I wanted to admit. Where is this coming from? I asked. From years of disappointment, she said coldly. From years of living with someone who always put work first. That's not fair, I said. Everything I did was for this family. Maybe that's what you tell yourself, she replied. Tyler finally spoke. Mom's been unhappy for a long time, Dad. I turned toward him, stunned. And you knew about this? He nodded. Emma quietly wiped a tear from her cheek. We all did. I felt like I had walked into a conversation that had started months earlier without me. So everyone knew except me? Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that says more than words ever could. Melissa stood and picked up her purse. I'm staying with a friend tonight. She paused near the door. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Then she walked out. The front door closed softly behind her. Softly. Somehow that hurt more than if she had slammed it. I sat there staring at the papers while my children avoided my eyes. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the windows. Inside, something much worse was breaking. And as I looked down at the final page of those documents, I noticed a date written in the corner. A date that made absolutely no sense. Because according to that paperwork, my wife had started planning the divorce months before the event she claimed had destroyed our marriage. And in that moment, I realized there was a piece of this story nobody was telling me. That date stayed in my mind long after everyone left the house. I sat alone in the kitchen while the takeout containers grew cold on the counter. The clock above the refrigerator ticked steadily. 10 o'clock. 11. Midnight. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt confused. The date on those papers did not match the story I had been given. It felt like finding a puzzle piece from a completely different box. As I sat there, my thoughts drifted backward. Back to the beginning. Back to the family I thought I had built. I grew up in a small farmhouse outside Cedar Rapids. My father worked long days repairing farm equipment. My mother taught second grade for nearly 30 years. We did not have much money, but we had routines. Every Friday night meant meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and board games around the dining room table. My father used to point at me and say, "Richard, a man keeps his word even when it costs him something." I carried those words my entire life. When Melissa and I married, I tried to build the same kind of home. The kind where people felt safe. The kind where birthdays mattered and Sunday dinners were never skipped. When Emma was 7, she loved helping me wash my old pickup truck in the driveway. She would spray water everywhere except where it belonged. "Dad, look at this rainbow," she would shout. Tyler was different. He followed me around with a toolbox that was nearly bigger than he was. "Can I help?" he asked every weekend. "You can hold the flashlight," I would tell him. That is the most important job. Those memories still felt real. More real than the silence that filled the house now. Looking back, I started noticing things I had ignored for years. Small things, easy things to dismiss. Melissa had always spoken for the children, even after they became adults. If I invited them somewhere, she often answered before they could. "They are busy, Richard. They already have plans. You worry too much." At the time, I believed her. During one Thanksgiving dinner 3 years earlier, I remember Emma mentioning a weekend trip she had taken with Melissa. I was surprised because I had never heard about it. "You never told me you were going," I said. Emma looked uncomfortable. Before she could answer, Melissa smiled and said, "It was last minute. Nothing important." The conversation immediately moved on. Another time, Tyler thanked his mother for helping him with a down payment on his first house. "Your mother made that possible," he said proudly. Melissa smiled. I smiled too. What I never mentioned was that the money had come from an investment account I had spent 20 years building for both children. Melissa knew that. I knew that. Yet somehow the story had changed over time. One small detail at a time. One conversation at a time. One missing truth at a time. Sitting alone in my kitchen that night, I began to wonder how many other stories had quietly been rewritten while I was busy working, trusting, and assuming everyone was pulling in the same direction. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. I opened it. There was only one sentence. "If you want to know when this really started, look at the records from March 17th. Beneath the message was an image attachment. My heart sank the moment I recognized what it was. The message from the unknown number lingered on my screen as I sipped my lukewarm coffee. I did not reply immediately, a strange calm settling over me, the first in weeks. Normally, I would have called Emma or Tyler right away to question every detail. Normally, I would have confronted Melissa with rising anger, letting it spill into harsh words. But I did not. I just stared at the screen, letting the words soak into my mind. Then I noticed the attachments and opened them. Files with old dates, transaction records, and notes I had never seen before. I realized, with a mixture of disbelief and growing anticipation, that these were the breadcrumbs I had been missing for years. They showed the subtle shifts in accounts, the small misdirection of funds, the selective memories enforced quietly over family conversations. It was clear someone had been manipulating the story for a long time. And now, for the first time, I saw it all. I remembered a phone call from my sister, Laura, who had asked me to meet her at a cafe 2 weeks earlier. She had hesitated, fidgeting with her coffee cup, and then whispered, "Richard, something is off. You need to see the real numbers before you react." At the time, I nodded politely and dismissed it, assuming it was just sibling worry. But looking at these records, I realized she had been right. Laura had been watching too, noticing small inconsistencies in how Melissa spoke about money, how Tyler and Emma responded to questions about inheritance, about bills, and about savings. "I think you are going to want to sit down for this," she had said, her eyes filled with concern. I could almost hear her voice again, steady and calm, and it reminded me that I did not have to react the way I always had. I could choose patience. I could choose strategy. For the first time, I felt a shift within myself. I decided not to call anyone yet. I did not confront Melissa. I did not show my children that I had discovered the misdirection. Instead, I began to organize the files, marking the dates, writing notes, piecing together the truth with meticulous care. Each discovery gave me a sense of control I had not felt in years. Later that afternoon, I walked through the empty house. The sunlight slanted across the hardwood floors, casting sharp lines through the blinds. I paused at the staircase, thinking about the moments I had spent rushing, worrying, trying to keep everyone happy, while the reality of their intentions had quietly unfolded behind my back. Then the phone rang. Laura's name flashed on the screen. "Richard," she said without preamble, "I think it is time we plan your next move. You have more leverage than you realize, and the first step is the hardest, but it will set the tone for everything else." Her voice, calm but insistent, made the tension in my chest both lighter and heavier at the same time. I nodded silently, though she could not see me. "Tell me what you need me to do," I said, and she answered with a list of small but precise steps, starting with documents, notes, and times that Melissa would never expect I had kept. As I hung up the phone, a strange anticipation filled the room. The silence of the house seemed to shift, as if it, too, was aware of the coming change. For the first time, I felt that the narrative was no longer fully in someone else's hands. Something had begun, something careful, deliberate, and just enough to unsettle the illusion Melissa had built around herself. And in that moment, I realized that the calm, the patience, the quiet observation would become my greatest advantage. Something was about to happen, something that would open doors to truths long hidden, and I felt the faintest smile tug at the corners of my mouth as I prepared to step forward into the revelation that had been waiting for me. As I traced through the documents and attachments I had gathered, a pattern began to emerge, one that made my chest tighten with both anger and disbelief. Melissa had been careful, meticulous even, in presenting a narrative where she appeared innocent, reasonable, and generous. Each conversation I remembered, each casual comment at a family dinner, now revealed subtle manipulation. I remembered a Sunday lunch 3 years prior. Emma had mentioned a scholarship fund she had supposedly been awarded from a local foundation. "Mom said you handled all the applications for me," she had said brightly. I smiled, proud of her, unaware that the letters she held in her hand were copies I had never sent, and the checks had been redirected into accounts I had assumed were untouched. My first shock came quietly, like a whisper. "Wait, these are not my letters," I muttered to myself. Then Tyler chimed in over dinner. "Dad, I thought Mom explained everything about the vacation payments last summer." He had nodded as if he expected me to confirm what Melissa had told him, but the dates on the forms I now had did not align with the story he believed. It was then I realized that her words, the way she had described events, the small insistences, the minor corrections, all had been a careful architecture designed to mislead not only me, but the children as well. I could almost hear her voice from years earlier. "Trust me, Richard, everything is fine. You do not need to worry." I had trusted her. Each lie had been wrapped in an almost imperceptible layer of warmth and concern, so well disguised that it seemed impossible for anyone else to detect. I remember confronting Melissa one evening about the unexpected transfer from our joint account. "I thought we agreed this money was for the property repairs," I said, handing her the bank statement. She looked at me calmly, almost too calmly, and replied, "I took care of it differently. I thought it was better this way." Her smile was the same gentle expression I had known for decades, yet it masked the calculation underneath. "Better for whom?" I asked quietly. She hesitated for a moment, then shrugged as if it were trivial. "Better for everyone, Richard." That one shrug, the casual dismissal, had been the turning point. I could feel the subtle tremor of deceit in every word, every glance, and every agreement I had ever trusted. The realization hit like a cold draft through a room with all the windows open. I could see how long this had been going on, the orchestration of events, the careful planting of evidence and misinformation. Even conversations I had had with friends who believed they were providing honest advice had been influenced by her subtle persuasion. "Richard, you need to be practical about the house," one friend had said, not knowing that Melissa had guided the discussion to ensure my perception was skewed. Each act, each statement, each minor adjustment of truth had been another brick in a wall meant to isolate me, mislead me, and ensure I did not see the full picture until it was too late. And now, staring at the evidence in front of me, the weight of all those years of unseen manipulation pressed down heavily. It was a quiet suffocation, a deep shock that took my breath away, leaving me sitting in the dining room, surrounded by the silent witnesses of photographs, letters, and bank statements, knowing that the narrative I had trusted completely had been crafted against me. And in that moment, the illusion shattered, leaving a vast emptiness where certainty had once lived, a space suddenly ready to be filled with revelation and the beginning of a response that would change everything. After hours of sorting through the stack of files on my dining room table, I began making calls. First to the bank, hoping to clarify discrepancies in the account transfers. Yes, Mr. Bennett, we have records of the transfers, but all went to the account ending in 43, the teller confirmed. I had that account memorized. That was supposed to be the joint college fund for Emma, and yet the balance had been rerouted over months, leaving nothing for its intended purpose. I next sent an email to the investment firm managing the portfolio I had carefully built for Tyler. Please provide a full statement for the last 5 years, I typed, hands trembling slightly as I clicked send. Replies came with polite explanations, delays, and conflicting information, all subtly suggesting the transactions were legitimate. I knew better. I could see the subtle gaps where Melissa had manipulated the flow of money. I tried texting Emma and Tyler to discuss the discrepancies, keeping my tone calm. Can you verify the records from last March? I want to make sure we are all seeing the same numbers, I wrote. The responses were distant, minimal, evasive. I will check later, Dad, Tyler replied. Emma did not respond at all. I felt the walls of the house close in. I could walk from the kitchen to the living room in 2 steps, yet it felt like miles of silence stretched between us. I remembered a letter I had sent months earlier, laying out detailed budgets for the family vacation and maintenance of the lake cabin. Melissa had replied politely. Yes, she had received it, and she would coordinate. When I pulled the envelope from my drawer and checked, several pages had been swapped, the numbers rewritten, amounts adjusted. The truth had been carefully masked in plain sight. I tried calling her directly, letting the phone ring once, twice, 3 times, until I finally hung up, the line connecting but no answer. The voicemail was left, carefully measured and calm. Melissa, please call me regarding the account discrepancies. It is important we discuss this as a family. No return call came. I tried again the next day. Then I called Emma, leaving a voice message that contained the dates and transactions I had flagged. Emma, I am hoping to hear from you soon. I need your perspective on these records. Hours passed. Nothing. Tyler texted finally, a single sentence. I am busy today, Dad. Talk later. That later never came. I mailed a handwritten letter to both children and Melissa, outlining each point of confusion, each missing or altered record, hoping the weight of paper and care would penetrate the fog of deception. Days passed, and yet no acknowledgement, no discussion, no hint that they understood what I had discovered. It was as if a wall had risen around me, separating my voice, my concern, my history from those I had trusted implicitly. I sat back in my chair, watching the late afternoon sunlight fall across the hardwood floors, feeling the quiet hum of isolation. The house that had once been a home now echoed with absence and indifference. I had tried methodically, patiently, repeatedly to restore connection, to clarify the facts, to bring honesty to the table, and I had failed. Every attempt met with polite deflection or avoidance. The emotional weight of the realization pressed against me. Alone, surrounded by documents, with the evidence clear yet the family unreachable, I felt a profound solitude settle over me, a deep, silent acknowledgement that the path forward would require more than calls, emails, and letters. The isolation was complete, and the quiet hung heavy, waiting for the moment when patience and observation would turn into deliberate action. The days that followed felt like moving through fog. Each morning I awoke to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the sunlight cutting thin lines across the floorboards, yet the house felt emptier than ever. I called Melissa one last time, leaving a voice message that I hoped would be received without confrontation. Melissa, I need to understand what has happened with the accounts and our arrangements. Please respond, I said, my voice calm but steady. No reply came. I tried again with Emma. Emma, Dad here. I have some concerns about the past transfers. Can we discuss this? Her reply was a single line. Not now, Dad. Too busy. Tyler answered briefly. Call me later, but later never arrived. The weight of the silence pressed on me as I moved through the house, touching objects that once held memories, photographs of vacations, the china from holidays, my favorite reading chair, and realizing they were now tokens of absence. On one evening, I poured a glass of water and looked at the lake view from the kitchen window. The reflection of the house across the water was calm, serene, but inside, I felt fractured, betrayed, isolated. "Dad, do you even know why this is happening?" Emma had whispered the last time we spoke in person, eyes avoiding mine. I had shaken my head, unable to answer, because the truth was more complicated than I could express. Months of careful planning, of appearances, of small manipulations, had eroded trust, replaced by a network of half-truths and deliberate omissions. I remembered how I had spent entire weekends driving to the bank, filling out paperwork, ensuring every detail for the children's future, and how each act of care had been quietly rewritten, redirected, or disregarded. At night, I sat in the dark living room, listening to the distant hum of passing traffic, and thought about the possibility that the people I loved most had already rewritten my narrative for their benefit. "Richard, you have to let it go," my neighbor, a longtime friend, said over the phone once, attempting comfort. But letting go felt like abandoning myself. The realization of my solitude, the tangible emptiness, the certainty that no one would voluntarily offer the clarity I needed, weighed on me in ways I had never experienced. I walked through the empty hallway, each step echoing, feeling the absence not as silence, but as a force, pushing me to recognize how much I had been left to navigate alone. And yet, amidst the grief, amidst the exhaustion and quiet despair, I noticed the smallest flicker. The folders of evidence, the notes I had meticulously compiled, the dates, the correspondences, they had remained untouched, waiting for the moment when my patience, observation, and careful planning would finally converge. I sank into the old armchair, letting my gaze fall on the organized stack of documents. And for the first time since everything had unraveled, I felt a subtle sense of agency. The isolation had been complete, the losses profound, and yet in the stillness, the faintest seed of recovery had been planted, hinting at a possibility that what was broken could eventually be rebuilt. The house remained quiet, the shadows long across the floor, and I understood that the deepest pain had already revealed the first path toward reclaiming truth and restoring what had been hidden. By the following Monday, I had returned to my small office downtown, the one I had kept for years after selling the larger property. The sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, illuminating a desk stacked with contracts, invoices, and a calendar marked with appointments I had set for myself, not anyone else. I leaned back in my chair and dialed a longtime client, Marcus, who had trusted me through decades of projects. "Richard, it has been a while," he said, his voice warm. "I have a new proposal for a remodel in the northern suburbs. Think you can handle it?" I smiled faintly. "Absolutely, Marcus. Send me the details, and I will review them today." After hanging up, I opened the blueprints and sketches I had prepared during the quiet months at home, each line measured and precise. It was different now, working without interruptions, without anyone questioning my decisions, and yet I could feel the old drive returning. I spent hours drafting proposals, making phone calls to subcontractors, scheduling site visits, and even mentoring a young architect, Sophie, who had shown up at the office curious about construction management. "You have a good eye, Sophie. Make sure to measure twice and always ask questions before committing to a design," I advised. She nodded, absorbing every word. The office phone rang again. This time it was Tyler, though he did not realize I had anticipated this moment. "Dad, I wanted to check on a project downtown," he said hesitantly. "I thought I should bring you in since you have more experience." I let a long pause hang. "I can review it this afternoon, Tyler. Make the necessary adjustments and send me the updated plan," I replied evenly, masking any emotion. Even in our exchanges, I could sense the respect beginning to return, the recognition that I still had skills and judgment that mattered. I walked to the window overlooking the city, watching cars glide along the streets, the bustle of life below reflecting the new rhythm I was establishing for myself. Each completed task, each confirmation of a project detail, was a small reclamation of autonomy and purpose. For the first time in months, I did not feel tethered to disappointment or betrayal. Instead, I felt momentum, a sense that the life I wanted, built on my terms, was within reach. I returned to my desk and opened a folder labeled Lake Cabin Renovation, reviewing every estimate, every contractor note, every projected timeline. I smiled quietly. This was mine to manage. This was my path forward, structured and deliberate. The door creaked, and Sophie peeked in. "Mr. Bennett, I finished the material estimates for the north wing," she said. "Do you want me to place the orders?" "Yes, Sophie," I said. "But first, double-check the suppliers for lead times. Accuracy now will save problems later." She nodded and stepped aside. Alone again, I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of solitude transform into focus and energy. The isolation that had been so oppressive now became a canvas for rebuilding, for reclaiming skills, for demonstrating that life could continue and even flourish without relying on anyone who had caused harm. Outside, the city moved on as usual, unaware of the quiet recovery taking place in my office, and I felt the first glimmer that the future I was shaping could be not only stable, but truly successful, built on precision, patience, and hard-earned wisdom. The next morning, I stepped into my office wearing a crisp navy blazer and a simple white shirt, the name tag on my desk reading, Richard Bennett, Principal Consultant. The sunlight reflected off the polished surface of the conference table, illuminating the city skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. I could feel a different energy now, the confidence that comes not from title alone, but from reclaimed authority. Sophie walked in, holding the latest project proposals. "Mr. Bennett, the suppliers confirmed the updated materials list," she said. I looked at her, my voice calm but firm. "Excellent. Make sure all contracts are double-checked before you send them out. Accuracy saves us trouble later." She nodded and left to complete the task, her quick steps echoing in the quiet office. Marcus, my client for the northern suburbs remodel, called next. "Richard, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your expertise. We need someone who can see every detail, and I know you are that person." I smiled slightly. "Thank you, Marcus. I will oversee the project personally. We are going to get it right the first time." Each call, each interaction, built upon the foundation I had set for myself, a tangible proof that the work I had done over decades was still valued and trusted. I glanced at the framed certificate on the wall from a leadership seminar years ago, dust gathering lightly in the corners. It now felt less like decoration and more like a symbol of resilience, a reminder of the skills that had always been mine. Later, I walked over to the project board in the corner of my office, scanning the notes and color-coded timelines. "John, are you sure about these delivery dates?" Sophie asked, her eyes focused on the markers I had carefully arranged. "Yes," I replied, "and any deviation will be noted immediately. We control the schedule, not chance." The day passed with a rhythm I had not felt in months. Each signature, each confirmation, each decision reinforced the sense that I had not only recovered control over my work, but also demonstrated competence that others could rely on. Even Tyler stopped by in the late afternoon. "Dad, I can see why clients come to you," he said quietly, his eyes avoiding the full depth of my attention. I nodded, letting him feel the acknowledgement without revealing everything I had endured. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the city lights flickered on like a constellation of opportunities, each glowing point a symbol of the progress I had made. I sat back in my chair, adjusting my blazer, and noticed how the simple emblem on my name tag seemed heavier now, not just a label, but a statement of presence, authority, and reclaimed identity. Outside the window, the streets buzzed with the ordinary life of Cedar Rapids, yet within these walls, I had rebuilt the structure of my professional and personal standing. Every document, every signed contract, every careful decision had reinforced the notion that I was no longer at the mercy of past manipulations. I felt grounded, capable, and quietly powerful. And as I looked down at the stack of reports on my desk, ready for review, I could sense the timeline catching up, ready to intersect with the present, connecting the lessons of the past months to the strategic actions I would take next, and I felt ready for whatever revelations or challenges awaited in the unfolding days. The morning of the hearing arrived with a gray sky hanging low over Cedar Rapids. A light rain tapped against the windshield as I parked outside the courthouse. Months earlier, I would have walked into that building feeling defeated. This time was different. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, looking at the folder resting beside me. Inside were documents, timelines, account records, emails, and one report that had quietly changed everything. My attorney, Daniel Mercer, met me near the entrance. He was a tall man in his early 60s with silver hair and the steady confidence of someone who never rushed. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Calm," I replied. To my surprise, it was true. He nodded once. "Good. Stay that way." We entered the building together. The hallway outside the courtroom was crowded with people waiting for their own battles to begin. Some paced. Some whispered. Others stared at the floor. I took a seat on a wooden bench and watched the rain slide down the courthouse windows. A few minutes later, Melissa arrived. Emma and Tyler walked beside her. Seeing them together still caused a dull ache somewhere deep inside me, but it no longer controlled me. Melissa looked confident, relaxed, as if the outcome had already been decided. Tyler spotted me first. "Morning, Dad," he said awkwardly. "Morning," I answered. Emma offered a small nod but avoided eye contact. Daniel quietly reviewed a few papers beside me. "Remember," he said, keeping his voice low, "today is not about emotion. It is about facts." I nodded. Facts. That was the word that mattered now. Across the hallway, Melissa laughed softly at something her attorney said. I noticed how comfortable she seemed. How certain. It reminded me of all the years when confidence had been enough to end difficult conversations before they began. Today, confidence would not be enough. The courtroom doors finally opened. We filed inside and took our places. The room felt colder than I remembered. The judge reviewed preliminary matters while attorneys exchanged documents. Papers moved across tables. Pens scratched against legal pads. The entire room seemed to operate in slow motion. Daniel leaned toward me. "One more thing," he said. "Whatever happens, let me do the talking." Understood. Minutes passed. Questions were asked. Financial statements were reviewed. Property records were discussed. Melissa remained composed throughout. Occasionally she glanced in my direction, almost expecting some reaction. I gave her none. The judge eventually turned toward Daniel. "Counselor, do you have anything further to present?" The room became very still. Daniel stood slowly. He adjusted his glasses and reached into his briefcase. My pulse remained steady, but I could feel the tension building around us. Across the room, Melissa's attorney sat up straighter. Emma looked confused. Tyler frowned slightly. Daniel removed a thin folder and placed it carefully on the table. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "There is one final item that directly affects several assumptions made throughout these proceedings." Melissa's expression changed for the first time that morning. Only slightly. Just enough for me to notice. Daniel opened the folder. He looked toward the judge. Then he looked toward Melissa. And finally, he lifted a single document into view. The room fell silent as everyone waited for the words that were about to be read aloud. Daniel Mercer placed the folder carefully on the judge's bench and opened it. "Your Honor, this report details inconsistencies in the claims made regarding property and financial management. It is supported by verified documents and independent analysis." He looked directly at Melissa. "These statements contradict previous assertions made under oath." Melissa's confident smile faltered, her fingers tightening on the arm of her chair. The judge leaned forward, reading the first few lines aloud. "According to this report, certain accounts and assets were misrepresented in the filings, and transfers previously undisclosed have been documented in detail." Emma gasped softly. Tyler swallowed, his eyes wide. I remained seated, hands resting on the table, expression calm. Melissa's attorney whispered quickly, trying to regain composure. "Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant to the current discussion." The judge raised a hand. "I will allow it. Continue, Counselor." Daniel's voice was even, deliberate. "These documents were collected over the past 6 months, verified by independent audits. They demonstrate that previous statements regarding the disposition of shared assets were incomplete and, in some cases, intentionally misleading." A silence fell over the courtroom. The hum of the ventilation was the only sound. Melissa shifted, glancing toward Emma and Tyler, who now looked between her and me with uncertainty. "Dad, did you know about this?" Emma whispered, almost inaudible. I nodded slowly, keeping my tone neutral. I reviewed the details as they became available. Daniel continued, "We are not here to punish. We are here to clarify facts and ensure that all relevant information is considered." He turned slightly, ensuring the report was fully visible. Melissa's confidence seemed to crumble incrementally. Her lips pressed together, eyes narrowing as she read over the highlighted sections. "Richard, how did you?" she started, voice tight. I looked at her calmly. I observed, I documented, I waited for the truth to become clear. I let the facts speak for themselves. Tyler blinked, comprehension dawning. "So you knew all along?" he said softly. I nodded again. I did not act until the evidence was complete. The timing matters. The courtroom remained tense, all eyes fixed on Melissa as Daniel laid out each discrepancy with precision. Every annotation, every note, every recorded transaction displayed in meticulous order made the narrative I had endured undeniable. Melissa's shoulders sagged slightly. She looked at Emma, who seemed shocked, almost betrayed, and then at Tyler, whose expression was unreadable. The room held a fragile breath. The judge adjusted his glasses, reviewing the documents, and finally said, "I will take all this under advisement before making a determination." Even in the quiet, the impact of the revelation was palpable. Melissa's facade of control had been carefully dismantled, replaced with doubt and uncertainty. And as she sat there, staring at the pages, it became evident to everyone that the man in front of her, me, was no longer the one she had underestimated. The shock in her expression was clear, a recognition of presence and capability she had failed to acknowledge before. The subtle power shift had occurred, and it hung in the air, leaving the room poised on the edge of what would happen next, hearts quietly bracing for the final reckoning. The courtroom remained silent after the judge carefully examined the documents. Melissa's shoulders slumped slightly, and she finally broke her gaze from the report. "Richard, how did you get all this?" she asked, voice wavering but quiet. I met her eyes evenly, the calmness in my voice masking the storm of thoughts behind it. I followed the facts. Every transfer, every statement, every communication was documented. I did not assume. I verified. Emma stepped forward hesitantly, her face pale. "Mom, I don't understand." "We thought." Her voice trailed off. Tyler, standing beside her, crossed his arms, the uncertainty in his eyes revealing a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. "So, all those explanations, all those assurances, they were false?" he asked, directing his question to Melissa. She could not respond immediately. Her attorney tried to interject, "Your Honor, but the judge raised a hand, signaling that all statements must be considered. Daniel Mercer then addressed the judge calmly. These documents show deliberate misrepresentation supported by independent verification. My client acted only after confirming all facts beyond doubt. The courtroom seemed to inhale collectively. Melissa shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable under the weight of evidence. I remained seated, my posture straight, hands resting lightly on the table. "I need clarity," I said quietly, still addressing the judge. "I need to ensure that any actions moving forward are based on truth, not assumption." The judge nodded, taking in the measured tone. "Understood, Mr. Bennett. That will be taken into account in my decision." Melissa finally looked at me, her eyes searching, as if trying to find the man she had underestimated for years. "I never realized you were keeping track," she murmured. I allowed a faint nod, without elaboration. "Observing and documenting is not a game," I said simply. "It is responsibility." Emma's lips parted, trying to form words, but nothing came. Tyler's brow furrowed. "Dad, I think I see now," he admitted softly. "I underestimated what you were capable of." The tension in the room was palpable. Daniel gave me a brief, confirming glance. I returned it with calm certainty. "This is not about proving strength through confrontation," I continued, voice steady. "It is about ensuring that facts are respected, boundaries are maintained, and the narrative moving forward is accurate." Melissa's face tightened, the real weight of accountability pressing against her carefully constructed composure. The judge adjusted his glasses, preparing to review the remaining evidence, but the shift in the room was undeniable. Everyone present now recognized that the person they had assumed powerless was fully in command of the truth, fully aware, and fully prepared to set clear boundaries. The subtle recalibration of respect and authority hung in the air, leaving a heavy, almost electric silence. And as I sat back slightly, letting the quiet settle, a part of me acknowledged that while the truth had been laid bare, the full resolution of the family's dynamics had yet to be determined, leaving the room poised for the next revelation and the lingering uncertainty of emotions still raw and unresolved. The weeks after the courtroom hearing settled into a rhythm that felt almost foreign in its quiet stability. I spent mornings in my office reviewing project plans, afternoons walking along the lakefront with a journal in hand, and evenings sipping tea while the city lights reflected in the water. The chaos of betrayal and deceit had faded, replaced by a sense of clarity I had not known for decades. I learned that the truth, when paired with patience and careful observation, carries more weight than anger or retaliation. Boundaries became my anchor. Respect for myself and my own decisions became the compass guiding every interaction. If you are out there, listening, and carrying your own unseen wounds, I want you to know that your worth is not defined by the actions of others. Protect your finances, protect your heart, and trust your intuition. It is more powerful than you realize. You can rebuild even when those you loved most have turned away, and in doing so, you create a life that reflects your values, your independence, and your dignity. I am Richard Bennett, 68 years old, and the core lesson I wish to share with you is that true strength comes from self-respect and unwavering awareness of your own boundaries. I placed a small, carved wooden sailboat on my desk that morning, a reminder of journeys undertaken alone yet guided by the wind of experience and the horizon of hope. Its polished surface caught the sunlight streaming through the window, a quiet symbol of patience, persistence, and the ability to navigate life's uncertain waters. Remember, the universe has a way of leading us back to the truth, and our purpose is often revealed in the calm that follows storms. I hope this story brings you reassurance that you are not alone, and that even after betrayal, clarity and peace are within reach. Stay tuned for the next story in this playlist, where we will explore how courage in the face of deceit can transform lives. Watch closely, reflect on your own journey, and carry the lessons forward as you continue to navigate your own path. The stories ahead will illuminate the power of resilience, the importance of self-trust, and the quiet victories that await those who persevere.